"Come inside now, Times." Running out, the weathered cattleman commanded,
Ow.
his words slicing through the Arizona winds sharp as steel. The young woman gazed at him with fearful eyes, her body shaking, wearing a faded dress that clung to her slight form. Dark stains marked the fabric at her shoulder blade, still wet enough to catch the last rays of daylight. In all his years working this harsh land, Jacob Henley had witnessed many desperate wanderers cross his property, yet this one was different, barely out of her teens. She possessed untamed copper hair and haunted eyes that harbored mysteries deeper than the storm brewing overhead. A worn leather bag pressed tight against her chest as if it held her very essence. "You're a stranger to me," she murmured, retreating toward his weathered porch. "Everyone I knew is gone now." In the distance behind her, dust plumes signaled approaching horsemen moving with deadly intent. Jacob's calloused fingers gripped his rifle tighter. 3 decades of surviving in this unforgiving stretch of Arizona territory had taught him to recognize peril like reading holy text, and every instinct warned him of impending violence. "Jacob's the name," he said, maintaining his composure. "And those riders tracking you aren't coming to share a meal." She cast a nervous glance toward the rising dust clouds, and back at his face. Her trembling grew worse. "My father's dead. They murdered every soul in Broken Creek." Her voice shattered on those words. "I'm the sole witness to their crimes." The wind intensified, bringing with it the smell of approaching rain mixed with something more sinister, the acrid scent of burning. Jacob's expression hardened. Broken Creek lay 2 days south, by horseback. If the settlement had truly been destroyed, these weren't common bandits pursuing her. These were killers who eliminated all evidence. All voices that could speak against them. Thunder rumbled in the distance, briefly revealing the mounted figures. 6, possibly 7, their animals foaming from relentless pursuit. They'd been traveling with singular purpose. "Driven by deadly resolve," young lady, Jacob said, stepping aside and motioning toward his cabin entrance. "Whatever secrets that bag holds matters little to me. But if seeing another sunrise interests you, decide now whether trusting a stranger beats facing what's bearing down on us." Her gaze moved from the satchel to his weathered features. Something in his expression, perhaps the same haunted understanding that lived within her own spirits, sealed her choice. She rushed up the wooden steps and through the doorway just as the first raindrops started falling. Jacob entered behind her, securing the heavy door with an iron bar. Through his window, the pursuing riders grew closer, near enough now to glimpse the cold steel of their weapons and the ruthless determination etched on their faces. Whatever nightmare she'd fled had finally caught up with her. "What are you carrying?" Jacob inquired, striking a match to light his oil lamp as darkness consumed the small cabin entirely. The nameless woman remained hunched in his crude wooden chair, clutching the leather bag like protective armor. "Proof?" she whispered eventually. "Documents. Correspondence of what they did to my community." Jacob poured steaming coffee from his iron pot, the bitter aroma mixing with the tension filling the air. "What manner of proof?" Her trembling hands opened the satchel, revealing papers bearing official stamps and signatures. "The Railroad Corporation. They coveted our territory for their new line, but our town council refused to sell, so they hired murderers to ensure no one remained to oppose them." Jacob's blood turned to ice. He'd heard whispered rumors of such atrocities, entire settlements vanishing overnight, their deaths blamed on native raids or disease outbreaks. But witnessing the evidence, seeing the calculated evil documented on corporate letterhead, made his stomach revolt. "How many perished?" he asked softly. 43 souls. Tears traced lines through the dust covering her cheeks. They struck at sunrise. "Shot down anyone attempting to flee, trapped the others in the church and burned them alive." She gripped one particular document until her knuckles went white. "I survived only because I was gathering medicinal plants in the foothills for Father's treatment." Through the window, Jacob observed torches flickering in the darkness. The riders had halted, likely making camp, waiting for dawn to conduct a proper search. They knew their quarry was close. "Why come here?" Jacob pressed. "Why not ride for the territorial capital?" Present this to the governor? Her bitter laughter echoed like desert sand. Because the governor's name appears on half these papers, the railroad controls them, all judges, lawmen, politicians. No place exists where their influence can't reach. Jacob studied the documents, grasping the terrible burden she carried. This wasn't merely evidence of murder, it was proof of corruption reaching the highest levels of territorial authority. Anyone attempting exposure would be signing their own execution order. "What's your strategy?" he asked. Her green eyes blazed with fierce determination despite her terror. "A journalist in Denver, Thomas Mackenzie. He's been investigating railroad corruption for months. If these documents reach him, ... That's 8 days of hard travel through Apache territory," Jacob interrupted. "And those killers outside know every path between here and Colorado? Then I'll perish in the attempt," she said simply. "My father died believing someone would reveal the truth. I won't let that hope die with him." Jacob moved to his window, watching the distant fires. 6 armed assassins against one aging rancher and a terrified young woman. The sensible choice seemed clear: surrender her, collect any reward, and forget this encounter ever happened. But then he thought of Broken Creek. 43 innocent people who'd trusted in justice and paid with their lives. Outside, a horse whinnied in the darkness, closer than before. The first gunshot shattered Jacob's kitchen window at daybreak. "They found us," the woman who'd finally revealed. Her name as Sarah Manifest whispered from behind his overturned table. Broken glass crunched underfoot as Jacob seized his Winchester rifle and extra cartridges. "Miss Manifest," a voice called from outside, smooth as poisoned honey. "We know your location. Send out the woman and her bag, and the rancher lives." Jacob peered through a gap in his shutters. 7 gunmen had surrounded his cabin, their weapons aimed at every possible exit. Their leader sat confidently in his saddle, a tall figure in a black coat adorned with silver ornaments. His face shadowed beneath a wide hat brim. "Wade Brennan," Sarah breathed. "The railroad's chief enforcer. He commanded the massacre at Broken Creek." Brennan's voice carried clearly in the still morning air. "1 minute to choose rancher. The woman dies regardless. But cooperation might spare your life." Jacob checked his rifle. 30 rounds, perhaps 40 if he conserved ammunition. Against 7 professional killers, the odds were impossibly grim. But Sarah spoke truth about one thing. These documents died with her. 43 murders would go unpunished. And countless other communities would follow. "There's a hidden cellar," Jacob whispered, indicating a concealed trapdoor beneath his kitchen carpet. "Tunnel connects to the barn. You might reach my horse." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I'm finished running. If death comes, let's meet it fighting." Another bullet punched through his front door, splintering ancient wood. Brennan's patience was exhausting rapidly. Time's finished. Rancher Jacob emerged from cover and fired his shot, finding one of Brennan's men in the shoulder. The gunman screamed and tumbled from his mount as the others unleashed hell. Filling the cabin with lead and wooden splinters, Sarah grabbed Jacob's old Colt from the mantelpiece. Checking the cylinder with experienced movements, "Father taught me marksmanship," she explained. Noting his surprised expression, they battled like trapped souls in purgatory, exchanging shots with men who killed for profit. Jacob's coffee pot exploded in fragments of tin and steam. His family Bible, carried west by his mother, in a covered wagon, disintegrated under enemy fire. But for every shot they managed, Brennan's crew fired 10 times more. The cabin walls resembled Swiss cheese. The roof leaked sunlight through bullet holes. And Jacob's ammunition dwindled dangerously low. "The barn's ablaze," Sarah observed, pointing through the rear window. Smoke poured from the structure, trapping Jacob's horse, eliminating their sole escape route. Brennan's laughter carried across the yard. "Nowhere left to flee, folks. Emerge now, or we'll roast you alive like those church mice in Broken Creek." Jacob looked at Sarah. Seeing his own grim resolve reflected in her gaze, they were down to final bullets, trapped in a burning cabin with no exit. Outside, Brennan was reloading leisurely. Victory now certain. Then Sarah noticed something that altered everything. "Look," she whispered, pointing through a bullet hole. Jacob squinted through the opening, and his breath caught. There, etched into the silver decorations on Brennan's coat, was a symbol he recognized, a distinctive railroad insignia. But modified with an additional mark, a small cross scratched hastily into the metal. "My father's craftsmanship," Sarah breathed. He was the town silversmith. Brennan visited months ago, wanting those ornaments repaired. Father always marked his work with that tiny cross, said every beautiful creation deserved divine blessing. Jacob stared at her, understanding flooding through him like Arctic water. "Your father worked on the weapon that destroyed him." Sarah nodded, tears flowing freely. "He trusted them. When Brennan arrived with tales of protecting the town from Apache attacks, Father believed every word. We all did." She clutched the leather bag tighter. "That's why this evidence matters so desperately. They didn't simply murder us. They made us partners in our own annihilation." Outside, Brennan called again. "Final opportunity, Miss Manifest. Walk out with that bag, and I promise swift death." Jacob's mind raced. 7 enemies, 2 cartridges remaining in his Winchester. And Sarah had perhaps 3 shots in the Colt, but something about her father's mark on those ornaments sparked a desperate idea. "That tunnel to the barn," Jacob said quietly. "It doesn't end there. It connects to an abandoned mine shaft my brother dug before his death. Emerges near the creek, 200 yards north." Sarah's eyes widened. "You could escape?" "We could escape," Jacob corrected. "But only if one creates enough distraction for the other to navigate the passage." They stared at each other, both comprehending the unspoken truth. Someone had to remain. Someone had to sacrifice everything. Sarah began to speak, but Jacob raised his hand. From outside came new sounds, hoofbeats, but different from those they'd been hearing. These approached from the east, moving rapidly. "Riders coming!" One of Brennan's men shouted. Jacob risked a glance through his front window and felt his heart leap. 3 men wearing territorial marshal badges were cresting the hill, their mounts lathered with perspiration. Genuine lawmen, not railroad-purchased thugs, but Brennan spotted them too. His expression turned cold as winter stone. "Eliminate the witnesses," he ordered his crew. All of them. Make it appear like a range dispute gone wrong. The stakes had shifted again. This wasn't merely about the documents or Sarah's survival anymore. It was about whether justice had any possibility in this forsaken territory. Jacob looked at Sarah, saw her father's determination blazing in her green eyes, and made his decision. "When the gunfight erupts," he whispered, pressing the satchel into her hands, "you run for that tunnel. Don't pause. Don't look backward. And don't let their sacrifice be meaningless." The sound of cocking weapons filled the air like deadly precipitation. The territorial marshals never had a prayer. Brennan's gunmen cut them down in a crossfire that boomed across the desert like cannon thunder, their badges gleaming uselessly in the morning light. But their arrival provided Jacob the diversion he needed, as Brennan's focus shifted to this new threat. Jacob kicked open his rear door and charged into the yard, Winchester blazing. His first shot dropped the guard, watching the cabin's back. His second shattered another man's leg, sending him screaming to the earth. By the time Brennan's crew realized the rancher's gambit, Jacob was already diving behind his water trough, drawing their fire away from the cabin, away from Sarah, the rancher. Brennan roared, "Kill him immediately." Bullets chewed the wooden trough to fragments, but Jacob had purchased precious moments. Through the chaos, he witnessed Sarah sprint from the cabin toward the concealed tunnel entrance. The leather satchel pressed against her chest like a shield. She nearly made it. Brennan's rifle cracked, and Sarah stumbled, crimson spreading across her shoulder. But she didn't collapse. Instead, she spun and fired the Colt with her uninjured arm, her bullet punching through Brennan's hat and forcing him to seek cover, the tunnel. Jacob shouted, emptying his remaining rounds to keep Brennan pinned down. Sarah reached the hidden entrance and disappeared underground, just as Jacob's ammunition was exhausted. For a heartbeat, The desert fell quiet except for crackling flames from the burning barn and groans of wounded men. Brennan emerged from cover, his face contorted with rage. Search everywhere. Locate that tunnel. Find her. But time had run out. By the moment Brennan's surviving men discovered the mineshaft entrance, Sarah was already emerging near the creek, 200 yards distant. Jacob watched through the smoke as she caught one of the marshal's horses, a powerful bay that had survived the ambush, hauled herself into the saddle despite her wounded shoulder. Brennan spotted her too. He raised his rifle, took careful aim across the distance, and fired. The bullet went wide. Sarah Manifest rode hard toward the northern hills, the satchel secured in her saddlebags, carrying the truth about Broken Creek toward whatever justice might still exist in the world. Jacob smiled grimly and stepped from behind the ruined water trough, his hands raised in surrender. Brennan's remaining men, only 3, now surrounded him with drawn weapons. "Where's she headed?" Brennan demanded, his silver ornaments catching the light. Jacob gazed at those decorations, thought about Sarah's father blessing them with his tiny cross, and felt something resembling peace settle over his spirit. "Reckon that's between her and the Almighty now." Brennan's face turned purple with fury. He raised his pistol, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot, when it came, echoed across the desert like divine judgment itself. 3 months later, the Denver Post published a front-page expose that toppled a territorial governor, dissolved a corrupt railroad corporation, and sent 7 men to federal prison for mass murder. The byline read Thomas Mackenzie. But everyone who mattered understood the true author. Sarah Manifest testified before a federal tribunal. Her shoulder healed, but her voice still carrying the weight of 43 lost souls. The documents she'd carried through fire and bloodshed became evidence. In the largest corporate corruption case in territorial history, Jacob Doug de Henley was laid to rest in the cemetery behind his burned cabin, his grave marked by a simple wooden cross. Sarah visited once, leaving wildflowers and a small silver medallion, her father's craftsmanship, beside the headstone. On still evenings, when the desert wind carries whispers from the past, some claim you can still hear the echo of his final words to Brennan. "Reckon that's between her and the Almighty now. Justice, it seems. Sometimes rides a wounded horse toward an uncertain dawn, but it rides all the same." The scene pulls back across the endless desert, revealing Sarah's horse vanishing into the rising sun. Carrying truth toward tomorrow like a sacred promise, the land itself refuses to abandon. Fade to black stories like this aren't merely told, they're experienced in the depths of the soul.